Happy birthday!
Happy first birthday to the Practically Speaking Mom, Intentional Mom, Strong Family podcast. I'm Rich Harrison, Val's husband, and today we're celebrating this milestone by looking at the highlights of year one. I'm really looking forward to next week's bloopers episode hosted by our youngest daughters. I've been collecting fun outtakes all year as I've edited and produced each episode. I handed all those bloopers over to Abby and Emma, and we set them loose to make a comic relief episode. That's next week, episode 59. Then, on November 2nd, Val debuts Season 2. Valerie, I wanted to begin today by telling you how proud I am of you for all that you pour into this ministry to encourage and equip moms week after week. So when you started out, what was that like? Were you nervous?
What was it like? Was I nervous? Well, do you remember as a kid that first time you stood at the edge of a diving board? It felt like you were walking this skinny plank of danger. It felt way up high in the air. The plunge looked so scary. Not only that, but you were out there on display for all to see. They'd see if you ran back off and didn't dive. They'd see you belly flop when you meant to do some graceful, smooth, tight dive. Well, I walked the plank of the diving board last October. You know, God called me to podcast really about 2 years ago. I took several months saying, I'm sure I must have heard you wrong, God. Well, I didn't. And so I began developing a launch team of women to pray for me and to give me feedback along the way. I had been in ministry for a couple of decades, speaking in person and on CDs, writing books, seeking to bolster women in their worthy journey of motherhood. Then last October, I took the plunge into podcasting, and this is what the first plunge sounded like. Welcome to the Practically Speaking Mom podcast, the place for an intentional mom to build a strong family. I'm Val Harrison, mom to 7 and wife to Rich for 27 years. I love warm drinks in my favorite mug, future dreaming with my favorite guy, and listening to music by any of my favorite kids, which is all of them. We have 3 married children, 2 college students, a high schooler, a 5th grader, 2 adorable grandsons, and our dogs Copper and Callie. That means our dinner table is usually full of happy chatter, and our tile floor is usually full of paw prints. And the Lord always gets an earful of prayers every day from this mama regarding Team Harrison. Our family isn't perfect. We're full of mistakes and redemption and lots of love. We make family relationships a top priority along with worshiping God and growing from every life experience. We're strong. Not because we're exceptional, we're not, but because we are intentional. No life is free from pain and mistakes or disappointments and regrets, and neither is my family's. In fact, mine especially. I simply use my stories of valleys and victories to encourage and equip moms for this worthy journey of motherhood. I've spent 2 decades sharing with parents through public speaking, blogging, authoring books, and now through this podcast. My message is one of motivation to look to God as your source for guidance in what to do as an overwhelmed mom with complicated kids. Mom friend, I want to bring you hope that your family, even with all of its unique personalities, imperfections, and scars, is God's masterpiece in the making. We'll spend a little time together each week looking at the 6 rooms of an intentional mom's home: the family room, kitchen, master suite, laundry room, school room, front porch. Wondering what those rooms are? You'll learn all about them in the introductory podcast, so take a look at that next. We'll work together to find your focus for your family to be the masterpiece God intended. And I'm praying for you, Mom. No matter what season of motherhood you're in, God has a purpose for your steps, and He's walking right beside you through all of your stuff. When you weep, He's weeping with you. And when you're anxious, He wants to be your comfort and your peace. And then, my mom friend, when your journey begins to reveal the redemption and victory that He was working on for you all along, God is going to be rejoicing with you on that day too. Mom, can I walk your journey with you a little each week? I'm going to share practical solutions and encouragement, and sometimes I'm going to tell you the hard things to motivate you to change, but it's all because I love you and I want victory for your family.
Now, Val, something unique about your podcast has been how much you've incorporated your family into the episodes. It really has allowed a well-balanced approach because, thanks to a large family, you're kind of living all stages of motherhood at the same time. So our listeners hear about the life of littles in 5 different episodes. In 3 of those, you share the mic with our daughter Becca, the mother of our 2 grandsons. You two talk about the mom life with babies and toddlers and preschoolers, namely Jamie and Asher, who were 2 and 3 years old this past year. Let's listen to a bit of episode 4, which is part 1 of Dealing with Lying in Your Child. In this clip, we hear Becca telling about confronting lying in her 3-year-old.
I brought him close to me and I looked him in the eyes and I was like, Jamie, I really want to believe you because your word means so much to me. Our words and truth are so important. So I'm going to believe you right now because I wasn't here, but I need you to be telling me the truth. I told him a different scenario of what truth versus what lying looked like that he could kind of understand, because that's a hard concept for a 3-year-old to understand. You know, it's not something visible that they can see. So giving an example, I feel like can kind of help them understand it better. And then in that situation, since I wasn't there, I wasn't able to really give consequences.
You made it important. You reiterated to him the importance of truth and that his words matter.
Mm-hmm.
And whether he was telling the truth or not in that situation, he found out that mommy really cares about truth.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we can do in those situations where it is unclear.
And to our listeners, to see all 5 episodes that deal with parenting littles, check out the show notes with this podcast for links to all of the episodes mentioned here. Then, Val, later in that episode, you address how to deal with lying in kids older than preschool, where you say that whenever we address any heart issue with our kids, the first place to start is with us, evaluating ourselves as parents on how we've been handling that issue up to this point in ourselves and in our children. Let's listen.
I am talking about you valuing truth, you valuing the relationship, you valuing your relationship with God. He calls us to be truth bearers and to not conceal things. Before you deal with your child, you really need to evaluate how have you been doing on this. So this applies in any kind of character situation that you're dealing with your child. You need to evaluate it in yourself first. There have been a lot of times when I have evaluated how I am in a given character issue, and I realize from that time of evaluation that I need to apologize that either I haven't been a good example in this area, and I believe that I've grieved the heart of God in my poor actions in that area, or I may need to apologize that, while I have had God's standard and lived by it, I have not required you to, child. I have not expected you to live to God's standard in this issue by following through with consequences when you do this. So I am so sorry that I did not give you consequences when I should have, because what I really did by not giving you consequences was I said it's not as valuable of an issue as God says it is. So a lot of times when I come back to the child, I have to start with apology. Now, what does that do? What would the different reaction be in your child? How would they react differently to you, A, responding in anger and tenseness about the situation, or B, starting with apologizing for how you haven't handled the past well in this area? Which one is going to leave them more open to the next step that you want to go to, and that is affecting their heart?
So those were both from part 1 of Dealing with Lying in Your Child. To listen to part 2 of that series, you should know that it's over in episode 12. I would encourage parents to listen to that mini-series of episode 4 and 12, even if lying isn't an issue, because, Valerie, you really take parents step by step through a process of affecting your child's heart issues. Another series for parenting in the younger elementary and middle years was the series on time-saving strategies in episodes 2, 5, and 10. In this next clip from that series, in episode 2, you talk about teaching your kids responsibility through chores.
Okay, your tendency is to give a job, hand off a chore or something to the child that is the most responsible one because you know they can handle it, which will make it easier for you. But really, that is not what you want to be doing when you're handing off an obligation, a responsibility. You want to think, which of my children is the youngest one that can handle this responsibility? And you want to give it to them. And here's why. You don't want that older one or that capable one to receive all of the responsibilities and stress them out and give them anxiety. They shouldn't be carrying all of the loads. But also, we want to be constantly developing all the different qualities and character development. So we don't want to do what's easy for us. We want to do what's effective for them. So we are gradually increasing all of their abilities. And that's what we want to be doing. Let's say I evaluate a responsibility that I think a child is capable of doing. Let's say it's one that I think only the oldest one can do. If it's an ongoing chore thing, then I'll say, okay, I'm giving you this new one and I believe you are ready for this new level of responsibility. I'm going to teach this one to you. And so we're going to give your old chore to this one. And so they trickle down to younger and younger until all of them are gradually growing in their abilities and everything.
The listeners have also met our oldest daughter, Tori, several times on the podcast when she's been on to talk about her ministry as a church youth director to tweens and teens. These two series have been our most popular, and they're episodes 6, 32, and 33. Here's a clip from episode 6, Parenting Middles and Teens.
Middle school and high school, as we all know and can probably remember, is a really vulnerable time. There's a lot of changes going on developmentally, physically, cognitively, emotionally. A lot of stuff is going on at that time. And so it can be a really vulnerable time, especially for middle school students. And for middle school students, they are asking the question, do you like me? They're very much looking for acceptance and a place to belong. Gen Z kids are longing to be known, are longing to be seen, even oftentimes without them realizing that they're longing for those things. So middle school students are asking, do you like me? Do I belong here? Do you accept me? Am I worth it? Am I worth anything? And high school students, by the time they're in high school, they have established a little bit more of their own identity, and they know what they like and what they don't like a little bit more, and they've just established more of their beliefs. And so in high school, they're starting to ask the question, do I like you?
Recently, Tori came back on to talk about her own spiritual struggle as a teenager in episodes 51 and 52, which included 3 original songs that she wrote as God led her through those struggles. And speaking of music, our intro and outro music piece was written and produced by our oldest son, Nathan. He also wrote the music to go with the words we wrote for our first introduction of marriage principles in episode 8. Let's pick it up there for a minute.
God brought these two people together, this person who most values truth and this person who most values peace. And then he said, now have a healthy family. and he wasn't doing that to be
it's
ornery.
Like one of those Chinese puzzles that has no solution.
No, he wasn't doing that to be ornery. He was doing that because if we do it together, if we both bring our values to the table in a humble and I'm working with you kind of way, then the end result is so much fuller. You see, your family unit and your marriage needs the uniqueness of the other one, but you need to be united uniquely, each of you honoring all of the other people's unique aspects. So we want to encourage you today to start making oneness a top marriage priority and discuss what do we need to change to allow oneness to be more healthy in our marriage, and how can we honor one another's uniquenesses and really allow that blend to produce something we could have never imagined.
We're learning a different perspective. We're turning our struggles from different directions into striving together. Now we're striving together for more than we could have been on our own before. Still you, still me, with a new entity of one.
The listeners who have followed our podcast from the beginning know that Rich and I have been occasionally coming on the podcast to share the relationship principles that God has graciously taught us through our experiences of, climbing up out of the marriage pit we had dug for ourselves. For those who would like to hear more, you may want to listen to episode 17, Goal Setting in Marriage, episode 23, Overcoming Negative Communication Habits, and episode 54, Nurturing a Sense of Security.
Now, we haven't only had family on the podcast. In this first year, you've shared the mic with 10 guests. One of our listeners' favorite guests has been Amanda Colady, licensed marriage and family therapist. The two of you did 2 series. One was episode 13, Mom's Mental Health, and the other were episodes 43 through 45, Managing Stress in Mom and Child. Let's listen to some of episode 43, where Amanda describes confronting toxic stress.
So I want you to imagine that you're walking through a forest and it's beautiful and you're in a peaceful forest and everything's going really well, and you turn around and you see this huge, scary bear. Yeah. And so immediately your brain sends a signal to your fight or flight system, your amygdala, that says sound the alarm, and your adrenal glands start pumping stress hormones into your body, and your heart pounds and your pupils dilate and your airways open up so that you're ready to either fight that bear or you can run from the bear, right? So your body is working really hard to help you. And that is the classic fight or flight that we hear about. And if you think about it, fighting a bear is a terrible idea, right? We probably won't win that fight, but our brain is like, hey, we could do it. And so it sends a message to the very rational part of your brain that says, don't think about it, we just need to do. And it turns off your thinking so that you feel like you could fight the bear if you needed to. And then the alarm center activates a part of your brain that is responsible for survival behavior, like supernatural lifting a car off of a child. And then the last thing your brain does is it tells your immune system to send a lot of inflammation into your body, just in case the bear gets a hold of you and you need to survive. And then I want you to imagine that all of that's going on and that bear comes home with you every single night. That is toxic stress. And that's what your body's going through every single day if you're experiencing toxic stress, which over time will have a lot of impact on your health. It really impacts your body, your brain, and your emotions when you're experiencing toxic stress regularly.
This is a powerful picture. I think I'll remember this one well, honestly. And as moms, our kids will maybe misbehave in some way. They're dealing with a grizzly bear, and I'm worried about their behavior right now. I need to help them get rid of the grizzly bear and not try to just keep helping my child manage through this being normal life when it shouldn't be.
I think that's true for even you. Take a hard look at in what point am I being chased by a bear mentally? And how do I feel when that happens? And is that healthy for me? And how does that impact how I am as a mom and a parent and all these other roles that I wear, right?
It's time for us to face the bears head on. So worth it to face the bears, whatever they are, whether they're in us or outside of us, if they're affecting us or our kids. Let's do it. It's worth it.
I know you have a lot of fun with your guests, whether they're family or not, but the fact that you've been a mom, living and learning the real mom life for 26 years yourself, means that you've gained plenty of wisdom about that, and I know it's your passion to share that with moms right where they're at, too. So, What's been some of your favorite topics?
One would have to be the Luke 2:52 episode. Over 20 years ago, I had 4 littles and I was feeling overwhelmed by all the ways I needed to be helping my children to mature. I was thinking of their character and their abilities and academics and their relationships and that I wanted them to know God better, and it all seemed so big. Then I read Luke 2:52 that says Jesus grew in wisdom, in stature, in favor with God, and in favor with man. And it occurred to me that I could put all of those different developmental aspects of my kids into these 4 categories: wisdom, physical growth, relationship with people, and relationship with God. Eventually, this became an entire simple system, a prayerful, intentional parenting goal session that I have twice a year about each of my children, and have been doing that now for over 2 decades. I share about this in episode 14, so here's 2 clips about the categories of physical growth and relationships with people. The second section, Jesus grew in wisdom, Jesus grew in stature. So, setting a stature goal. Is this the semester where your child will learn to ride a bike, or mow the lawn, or learn to play the trumpet? Does your child have some learning limitations that could be improved with crossing the midline exercises? Sometimes a parent will know, I know they're not dyslexic, but they're having some kind of issues. Try midline exercises. You can just look those up online and see those, but they're literally physical exercises that you can do to help their brain make some changes in the way it does some thinking. Okay, does your child want to start baseball? Maybe you want to incorporate active play or exercise at the top of every hour throughout the day in breaks, during Christmas break, or if you homeschool during the school year. Every hour, I want my kids to be moving some. It's better for their life in every way if they get some movement regularly. Even improving handwriting could be the physical goal for this semester if their handwriting is really holding them back. For example, maybe they're really slow at it, or it's so unclear that they can't see it, or maybe you would like to help them learn cursive so that they could be faster, or shorthand so that they could be even faster at taking notes, for example. What is the one stature or physical goal that would most help your child this semester? So Jesus grew in wisdom, stature, favor with God, and favor with man. So we're on favor with man now. Is there a particular relationship that needs help? Do they have some social skills weaknesses? Or do they lack a particular manner? Is it time to learn how to be a good friend? Really, the category that's kind of my passion is relationships and people skills, because I feel like it's such a critical part of our whole life. Our whole life is about the relationships we have. Even in a job, your child's going to grow up and have a job, and their success is going to depend largely, for sure, on their character. Whether they have integrity and a strong work ethic, and whether they're reliable, but also their people skills, because they could be super smart, and if they don't know how to interact with others, it's going to really hold them back. It's going to hold their business back if you haven't taught your child to have good people skills. So this category of favor with man is just so critical for all aspects of their life, for their marriage, for their siblings. You want their sibling relationships to be ones that they keep their whole life. And that partly is really dependent on how they learn how to be friends with their siblings. So you would just prayerfully evaluate, God, what is the relationship issue or the people skills issue that is most critical for my child to learn next?
Another series from this past year was Root Parenting versus Surface Parenting, where you talk about our tendency as parents to respond to visible behaviors from our kids at face value rather than digging deeper.
Yes, it's so important to take the time to venture below the surface to the root cause of our children's behavior. Is it fear, resentment, feelings of inadequacy, a physical issue? Are they being bullied? There is so much happening below the surface in our children. In episode 25, part 1 of Root Parenting versus Surface Parenting, I explain what it is, what root parenting looks like. Then in part 2, I go into more detail about how to identify the causes of the behavior or the attitude. Now, this is definitely a series where you want to start with part 1. Now, this clip is from part 2, which can be found in episode 26, but start with 25. There have been so many times in the midst of a stressful or difficult parenting moment with my kids that I have shouted a silent, pleading prayer to God, asking Him to give me wisdom in the moment. And generally, His guidance to me is to slow down, to calm down, to give the situation the time it deserves to dig deeper into my child's heart behind the behavior, before I over-respond or under-respond for that matter, because we can do either one. See, there's over-responding and there's under-responding, and both are highly problematic for the best possible outcome of a parenting situation. Our response gives value to our child's offense. If we have no response at all outwardly, we are sending the message that their behavior was no big deal, and that would be under-responding. On the other hand, if I over-respond to a situation, then my behavior, listen to this, parents. I've been guilty of this a lot. Perhaps you have too. If you over-respond in a situation, then your behavior becomes a distraction in the situation.
Now, Val, I know from time to time, moms who haven't heard the podcast will sometimes ask you, why are you doing this? What's your goal?
That question always catches me off guard because for me, this isn't some accolade or career pursuit. In fact, I don't know where God is taking this. I'm pursuing God's call on my life. I'm compelled to share what God has placed on my heart for moms. For the past 20 years, I've been doing that. And one of the foundational convictions He's put in me is just how important it is to remain closely connected to Him as our source. Mom, He is your source for everything you need every day.
Well, that's great. And I know you refer to this as Feasting with the Father in episode 27, which is entitled Relationship Killers, Maintaining Influence, and Mom, Are You Out of Order? Let's hear a clip from that.
So many moments and days and prayers and decisions and worries and fears and celebrations. There were so many times when I would not know what to do and needed God's help, or when I'd make the wrong decision, or one of the kids would do something that was a bad decision. There's so many things that happen in the days of our lives, right? Well, what was the most important thing that these children of mine needed in a mother through all those days and years? They needed a mom who was daily feasting with the Father, who really understood that He is my source, that He is my strength, that He is my joy, that He is my guide. They needed a mom who was bringing all of me, every aspect of my life, all of my wants and dreams and goals and fears and comparisons and confusions and decisions and children and marriage and past and future, bringing it all to Him as my offering every day and saying, God, these are bigger than me, but they are not bigger than you. So I place them in your hands, and I want to spend some time with you, filling me up, because I need my heart to be full of you, Lord, so that I can then pour out from the fullness of you, pour out to my children.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week, but it really has been fun to take a look back over the past year. God has grown this podcast to some great milestones already, such as having registered listeners from over 50 countries. There's something I didn't mention at the beginning of this episode. Val isn't in the studio with me now, so it's the perfect time to share this. Today is Val's birthday. And so, Val Harrison, the Practically Speaking Mom, to the world, you're an inspiration to all intentional moms who are striving daily to live out God's calling on their life in their role of motherhood. But to me, Valerie, you are my greatest blessing and the best gift God could give, the one I love to laugh with and share my everything with, and the one I dearly love. Your heart for God and your walk with Him have challenged and inspired me for all these years, which is why words can't say how much I believe in you and what you're doing. And I'm so glad to be a part of this ministry and a partner with you in all of life. I love you so much, and a huge congratulations to you on this first year of your podcast. No matter where God takes us from here, we'll go there together, and it will be great. So, all of you intentional moms who are building strong families out there, join me in wishing Val a happy birthday by showing some encouragement and love for her this week. You can leave a review about her podcast or ministry on whatever platform you use, Apple or Google, for example. Every week, she is praying and seeking God's heart on your behalf to bring you the encouragement and words that God gives her for you. Could you leave a review to tell the world how this podcast has impacted your life and your family? That would bring her encouragement to know that her efforts are making a difference. And don't forget that next week, Abby and Emma are hosting our bloopers episode. Then the following week, we debut Season 2 of the podcast. Val Harrison, the Practically Speaking Mom, has lots of surprises for you in the debut of Season 2. So, happy birthday, Practically Speaking Mom podcast, and happy birthday, Val.